It was the evening when Debienne and Poligny, the managers of the opera, were giving their final gala performance to mark their retirement. Suddenly, the dressing room of La Sorelli, one of the principal dancers, was invaded by half a dozen young ladies of the ballet, who had just come up from the stage after dancing Poliote. They rushed in, amid great confusions, some giving forced, unnatural laughter, others crying out in terror. Sorelli, who wanted to be alone for a moment to run through the speech she was to deliver to the resigning managers, looked angrily at the mad, tumultuous crowd. It was little Jams, the girl, with the tip-tilted nose, forget-me-not eyes, rose-red cheeks, and lily-white neck and shoulders, who gave the explanation in a trembling voice. "It's the ghost." And she locked the door. Sorelli. S dressing room was furnished with ordinary official elegance. A pier glass, a sofa, a dressing table, and a cupboard or two provided the necessary furniture. On the walls hung a few engravings, relics of her mother, who had known the glories of the old opera in the Rue La Pelletier, along with portraits of Vestris, Gardel, Dupont, and Bigottini. But to the young corps de ballet girls, who were lodged in common dressing rooms and spent their time singing, quarreling, teasing dressers and hairdressers, and buying one another glasses of cassis, beer, or even rum, until the call-boy's bell rang, this room seemed like a palace. Sorelli. I was very superstitious. She shuddered when she heard little Jams speak of the ghost, called her a silly little fool, and then, being the first to believe in ghosts in general and the opera ghost in particular, immediately asked for details. "Have you seen him?" "As plainly as I see you now," said little Jams, her legs giving way beneath her as she dropped with a moan into a chair. Thereupon little Giry, the girl with eyes black as sloes, hair black as ink, a swarthy complexion, and skin stretched tightly over thin little bones, added, "If that's the ghost, he's very ugly." "Oh, yes," cried the chorus of ballet girls, and they all began to talk at once. The ghost, they said, had appeared to them as a gentleman in evening dress, suddenly standing before them in the passage, though no one knew from where he came. He seemed to have passed straight through the wall. "Pooh," said one of them, who had kept her head. "You see the ghost everywhere." And it was true. For several months, nothing had been discussed at the opera except this ghost in dress clothes, who wandered through the building, top to bottom, like a shadow. He spoke to no one. No one dared speak to him, and he vanished as suddenly as he appeared, as a real ghost should. He made no sound when walking. At first, people laughed and made fun of this figure, dressed like a fashionable gentleman or an undertaker. But the ghost legend soon grew among the corps de ballet. All the girls claimed to have met him more or less often, and the loudest scoffers were never the most at ease. When he didn't appear, accidents, whether comic or serious, were blamed on him. A fall, a prank, a lost powder puff, these were all the work of the opera ghost. But who had truly seen him? After all, you met plenty of men in evening dress at the opera who weren't ghosts. Still, the girls insisted this one was different. His suit covered a skeleton, and his face was a death's head. This idea came from the description given by Joseph Buquet, the chief scene shifter, who had actually seen the ghost. He had run into him on the little staircase by the footlights leading to the cellars. He only caught a glimpse before the ghost fled. But to anyone who would listen, he said, "He's extraordinarily thin, and his coat hangs on a skeleton frame. His eyes are so deep you can barely see the pupils, just two dark holes, like a skull. His skin is stretched over his bones like a drumhead, and it isn't white, but a sickly yellow. His nose is so small it disappears in profile, and the absence of it is horrible to look at. The only hair he has are 3 or 4 long, dark locks on his forehead and behind his ears." Now, Joseph Buquet was a sober, serious man, not one given to flights of imagination. His words were received with amazement, and soon others also claimed to have seen a man in evening dress with a death's head. Sensible people at first dismissed it as a prank played on Buquet by his assistants. But then came a series of strange incidents that even the shrewdest minds found hard to explain. For instance, a fireman is a brave fellow, afraid of nothing least of all fire. Yet one fireman, after making his inspection rounds in the cellars and venturing farther than usual, suddenly reappeared on stage, pale, trembling, eyes wide, and practically fainting in the arms of little Jam's proud mother. Why? Because he had seen coming toward him, at the level of his head but without a body attached, a head of fire. And as I said, a fireman does not fear fire. His name was Pompin. The corps de ballet was thrown into consternation. At first glance, this fiery head hardly matched Buquet's description of the ghost. But the young ladies quickly convinced themselves the ghost had several heads, which he changed as he pleased. Naturally, they imagined they were in terrible danger. If even a fireman fainted, the ballet girls had every excuse to be terrified when passing a dark corner or poorly lit corridor. Sorelli herself, the very next day, placed a horseshoe on the table in front of the stage doorkeeper's box. Everyone who entered the opera, by any way other than the public entrance, had to touch it before stepping onto the staircase. This horseshoe is not an invention of mine, any more than any other part of this story, alas, and may still be seen on the table in the passage outside the stage doorkeeper's box, when entering the opera through the Cour de l'Administration. Now, to return to the evening in question. It's the ghost. Little Jams had cried. An agonizing silence filled the dressing room. Nothing could be heard but the girl's heavy breathing. At last, Jams flung herself against the far wall, her face showing real terror, and whispered, "Listen." Everyone strained their ears. Outside the door came a faint rustling like silk sliding over the panel. No footsteps, only that sound. Then it stopped. Sorelli tried to be braver than the rest. She stepped toward the door and asked in a shaky voice, "Who's there?" No answer. Feeling all eyes fixed on her, she forced herself to speak more loudly. "Is anyone behind the door?" "Oh yes, yes. Of course there is," cried Meg Giry, that little dried plum, heroically clinging to Sorelli's gauze skirt. "Whatever you do, don't open it. Oh Lord, don't open the door." But Sorelli, armed with the dagger she always kept with her, turned the key and pulled the door open. The ballet girls retreated to the back of the room as Meg Giry cried, "Mother! Mother!" Sorelli looked into the passage bravely. It was empty. A gas flame, trapped in its glass lamp, cast a reddish light that failed to chase away the surrounding darkness. With a sigh, Sorelli slammed the door shut again. "No," she said. "There's no one there." "Still we saw him," Jams insisted, tiptoeing timidly back to Sorelli's side. "He must be prowling around somewhere. I won't go back to change. We'd better all go down to the foyer together for the speech, and come back up together." The child touched the coral ring on her finger, her charm against bad luck. Sorelli, meanwhile, secretly traced a St. Andrew's cross with her thumb on the wooden ring she wore on her left hand. "Come, children, pull yourselves together," she said. "I dare say no one has ever really seen the ghost." "Yes, yes, we saw him just now," cried the girls. "He had his death's head and his dress coat, just as when he appeared to Joseph Buquet. And Gabriel saw him too," said Jams. "Only yesterday afternoon in broad daylight. Gabriel, the chorus master." "Yes, didn't you know? And he was wearing his evening clothes in broad daylight." "Who? Gabriel?" "No, the ghost. Of course. Gabriel told me so himself. That's how he knew it was him. Gabriel was in the stage manager's office when the Persian walked in. And you know the Persian has the evil eye." "Oh yes," chorused the ballet girls, warding off bad luck with the sign of the horn's forefinger and little finger extended, while the middle and ring fingers bent under the thumb. "Perfect. Thanks for sharing the next section. I've rewritten it in American English style. keeping the meaning and phrasing intact, while correcting grammar, punctuation, and smoothing the flow for clarity. "And you know how superstitious Gabriel is," continued Jams. "Still, he's always polite. When he meets the Persian, he just slips his hand into his pocket and touches his keys. Well, the moment the Persian appeared in the doorway, Gabriel jumped from his chair to grab the lock of the cupboard, so he could touch iron. In doing so, he tore a whole skirt of his overcoat on a nail. Rushing to get out, he banged his forehead on a hat peg and raised a huge bump. Then, stepping back suddenly, he scraped his arm against the screen near the piano. He tried to lean on the piano, but the lid slammed shut on his hands and crushed his fingers. He bolted out of the office like a madman, slipped on the staircase, and tumbled the whole first flight on his back. I was just passing with Mother. We picked him up. He was covered in bruises, and his face was bleeding. We were terrified, but suddenly he started thanking Providence that he had gotten off so cheaply. Then he told us what had frightened him. He had seen the ghost behind the Persian, the ghost with the death's head, just like Joseph Buquet described. Jams had told her story so quickly, as though the ghost was right at her heels, that she was out of breath by the end. A silence followed while Sorelli polished her nails in excitement. It was broken by little Giry, who said, "Joseph Buquet would do better to hold his tongue." "Why should he hold his tongue?" someone asked. "That's Mother's opinion," replied Meg, lowering her voice and glancing around as though she feared other ears might overhear. "And why is that your mother's opinion?" "Hush. Mother says the ghost doesn't like being talked about." "And why does your mother say so?" Because. Nothing. Her reticence only fueled the young lady's curiosity. They crowded around little Giry, begging her to explain. Side by side, leaning forward together, their faces showed both fear and eagerness, each feeling their blood run cold while taking a strange delight in it. "I swore not to tell," gasped Meg, but they would not leave her in peace, promising to keep the secret until, burning to say what she knew, Meg finally began, her eyes fixed on the door. "Well, it's because of the private box." "What private box?" "The ghost's box. The ghost has a box." "Oh, do tell us." "Not so loud," said Meg. "It's box 5U, no, the one on the grand tier, next to the stage box on the left." "Oh, nonsense. I'm telling you, it is. Mother has charge of it. But you must swear not to breathe a word." Of course. Well, that's the ghost's box. For over a month, no one has had it except the ghost. Orders have been given at the box office that it must never be sold. And does the ghost really come there? Yes. Then somebody must come. No. The ghost comes, but there's nobody there. The ballet girls exchanged uneasy glances. If the ghost came to the box, he must be seen after all. He wore evening clothes and a death's head. They tried to make Meg see this, but she replied, "That's just it. The ghost isn't seen. He has no dress coat and no head. All that talk about a death's head or a fiery head is nonsense. You only hear him when he's in the box. Mother has never seen him, but she's heard him. She knows because she gives him his program." Sorelli cut in Giry. "Child, you're making this up?" Little Giry began to cry. "I ought to have kept quiet, if Mother ever found out. But Joseph Buquet had no right to talk about things that don't concern him. It will bring him bad luck. Mother was saying so just last night." Suddenly, hurried, heavy footsteps echoed in the passage, followed by a breathless voice. "Cecile, Cecile, are you there?" "It's Mother's voice," said Jams. "What's the matter?" She opened the door. A stout, formidable-looking woman burst into the dressing room and collapsed groaning into a chair. Her eyes rolled wildly in her brick-red face. "How awful," she cried. "How awful." What? "Joseph Buquet." "What about him?" "Joseph Buquet is dead." The room filled with screams, gasps, and cries for explanation. "Yes, he was found hanging in the third-floor cellar. It's the ghost, little Giry blurted out, as though against her will. She instantly corrected herself, pressing her hands to her mouth. No, I didn't say it. I didn't say it. But all around her, her panic-stricken companions whispered under their breath. Yes, it must be the ghost. Sorelli turned pale. I'll never be able to deliver my speech, she murmured. Madame. Jams gave her opinion as she emptied a glass of liqueur, left on the table. The ghost must have had something to do with it. The truth is, no one ever really knew how Joseph Buquet died. The inquest verdict was natural suicide. In his Memoirs of a Manager, M. Moncharmin, one of the joint managers who succeeded Debienne and Poligny, described the incident as follows. A grievous accident spoiled the farewell party given by Debienne and Poligny. I was in the manager's office when Mercier, the acting manager, burst in, half out of his mind, announcing that the body of a scene shifter had been found hanging in the third cellar under the stage, between a farmhouse set and a scene from Le Roi de Lahore. I shouted, "Come and cut him down." By the time I rushed down the staircase in the Jacob's ladder, the man was no longer hanging from his rope. So, M. Moncharmin called this natural. A man hangs himself, they rush to cut him down, and the rope has disappeared. Moncharmin offered a simple explanation. It was just after the ballet, and the dancers wasted no time cutting the rope into pieces as charms against the evil eye. There you are. Picture the corps de ballet rushing down the Jacob's ladder and dividing up the rope in less time than it takes to write. But when I think of the exact spot where the body was found, the third cellar under the stage, I can't help but imagine that somebody must have had a special interest in making sure that rope disappeared after it had done its work. Time will tell if I'm wrong. The terrible news spread quickly through the opera, where Joseph Buquet had been well liked. Dressing rooms emptied, and the ballet girls, crowding around Sorelli like frightened sheep around their shepherdess, hurried through the dim passages and staircases toward the foyer, trotting as fast as their little pink legs could carry them.